So I would open the floor for the questions. I see that there are not too many, which means that you made a great job and you were very clear. But still, I would like to start the question and answer session. If Anne is ready, we can start.
Yes,
I don't know who is taking.
Maybe before we start,
Yes,
I can say something which might be helpful
of
already
course.
at the time that potential beneficiaries will start preparing their budget, because we have seen that there were a lot of errors with regard to the cost that were claimed for staff that was seconded or for staff that was working under natural person contract, especially because the criteria on which they had or with which they had to comply were not followed. And it is very important to double check this first, because, for example, if an employee of your organization needs to come to the office every day or maybe 2 days per week, this is also obligatory for seconded staff and for staff that is working under a natural person contract. If during the implementation or at the time of the reporting, we see that this is not the case, these costs cannot be part of your staff cost, of your personal cost, and they will be considered under the 50% flat rate. So have a look before preparing your budget that you make sure that they can fit in the personal cost category. Then I also noticed from the questions that were asked already that there is some misunderstanding about the co-financing, or that this part is not very well understood. So what do we mean with the co-financing? Normally, you will incur costs for the implementation of your activities under your grant agreement, and we will finance maximum 70% of that. So this means you will just incur this cost, you will report this cost to us, and then we will pay or contribute maximum 70%. The other 30%, these are costs that normally you already paid, but those we will not reimburse. So these costs will need to be covered by other third-party contributions through your own resources, which can be membership fees, or by income that you generate through the project or through your work program. For example, you organize a conference or you organize an event and you ask an entry fee. This would then be income generated by your project. So this is what I wanted to first say, because I saw that there was a lot of confusion. And yes. I think that also the first question.
Thank you for this. Yes, for the clarifications. No, I just wanted to say that participants cannot ask questions directly, but they have to ask the questions in Slido. And if the question they want to ask is already there, they should like it so that it goes up and it's treated in priority, because I see that someone is raising hands, but unfortunately it's not possible to ask directly. So, but shall we move to the questions in Slido then? Anne, do you want me to read them for you? So the first one is it possible to integrate in-kind contributions? For example, part of our partnership has permanent staff positions. Is it possible to list these personal costs as own financial contribution?
Well, I think I just already answered this question. So, of course, you will pay your personal costs and we will then just contribute. We will calculate the contribution at 70% and then we will reimburse this cost to you. So, but you, in principle, have already paid this cost.
Thanks. And second question, can subcontractors be based in a non-EU country?
Yes, we have no limitations with regard to that. Note that subcontracting costs are not separately financed. They are covered by the 50% flat rate. This does not mean that when you have subcontracts that you need to make sure that they comply also with some of the conditions of our grant agreement. So there is in the grant agreement a specific part that will list all the articles that you need to make sure to cover also in your subcontract, because it needs to be back to back.
Okay, thank you. Next question is finance. As an NGO, we don't always have all income secured yet for future years as we fundraise to secure that. Therefore, income and costs are different on the SGA application. Will this have an impact? How can we explain this?
I think that this is a question for the evaluation, if I understand well. So,
well, I suppose they give a kind of estimation of their...
yes. So we just need to make sure that you will be able to co-fund the 30%.
Yes. Okay. How does the personal cost calculation address long-term, more than 30 days sick leaves in terms of their impact on project budgets?
Well, as already mentioned by Lorenzina, the way that we define the daily rate is always the same way. It is the total salary cost. In this case, since it are operating grants over a period of 1 year, divided by 215 days. There is no way that the rules allow to reduce this number of days by, for example, deducting the 30 days of sick leave. So it is always 215 days. So there are no specific provisions.
Okay, thank you. The next is, I have some questions on the 30% co-funding and what would count towards this. Would that be the sum of various overheads, or what type of documentation will be required to show that we meet these requirements?
Well, I think we already answered the co-funding questions. So as we said, we just co-finance to costs that you have already incurred.
Okay. If we raise the share of budget requested in comparison to previous FPA, this will have a negative impact on the evaluation. Do we have to motivate this choice?
Well, I am not sure if there are persons from the that deal with the evaluation, because this one I cannot really answer.
So if the budget, the share of budget requested in comparison to previous FPA, maybe Joël can reply to this?
Yeah, hold on. I'm just trying to read it. If we raise the share of budget requested in comparison to previous FPA, this will have a negative impact on the evaluation. Do we have to motivate this choice? So it will not have a negative impact per se on your evaluation. But as you will have understood, we're also looking at the dependency that you have on the EU contribution that you're asking. So if this EU contribution increases, but your work program also increases, you're in a very well placed to motivate and explain why you're asking for more. Now, if your work program shrinks in comparison to the past and at the same time your budget request increases, we might be a bit more doubtful as to your capacity to become more independent from the EU contribution. So in all cases, you're advised to motivate your choice, but it might not necessarily lead to a negative impact on the evaluation.
Yeah, it's many factors that have to be taken into account. Yeah, thanks. If we ask for 200,000 euro EU grants for a total budget of 400,000 euros, 50% funding rate, if we only report 300,000 in the reporting form, will we receive 150,000 euros, 50%, or 200,000 euros as 70% is the maximum co-funding?
Well, if we have fixed your grant amount at the time of the grant agreement preparation stage, if you would receive the grant, then this is of course based on a calculation of the 70% funding rate. If you reduce it and you say, I only want to have the 50%, then this is fine. At the reporting stage, however, we will look at the eligible cost that you have incurred, and we will multiply this again with the 70%, which is the maximum co-funding rate. Then it will be up to you to define the amount that you will request as your final funding. Of course, if we see that you were supposed to get a lot of extra funding from other sources, and now all of a sudden this is no longer the case, then you may still want to justify this in your report. But in principle, you will receive the 70%, or you could potentially receive the 70% of maximum co-funding based on the cost that you have declared.
Yes, thank you, Anne. Very clear. Next question is, could you confirm that we should include all the revenues, for example, other grants, membership fees, sales of our project outputs, if any, event tickets, in income generated by the action, as this differs from the income to report?
Well, for the budget, we ask you to indeed include all the different type of revenues, because we need to make sure that the total cost that you foresee for your grant are covered by the income. And this is and the EU grant and any other income that you can have, like membership fees and so on. So at the time of the reporting, this will be different. We will not ask all these things anymore. The only part that will be there is income generated by the project.
Okay, thank you. A1, cost for employees or equivalent. What is equivalent?
This, in fact, this is not really applicable to NGOs normally, because equivalent, this is like for statutory staff in public entities that do not really sign an employment contract, but that get a decision on employment. So this is to be ignored for the NGOs.
Maybe the other types of staff, like seconded staff.
No. Equivalent is for decision of it's for civil servants, in fact.
Okay, thanks. Is there budget for FPA or only for SGA? Which is the main EU contribution? 70% of 700,000 per year. Well, it's both.
Well, there is only budget for the SGAs, of course,
Right.
because the FPA is not linked to a specific amount. It is a framework partnership agreement that is signed. And only when you have signed this, you can participate for an SGA agreement or participate in the call for the SGA. So then you will get a specific grant agreement that can be maximum for 700,000 euro, but it can also be less. It will be the 70% multiplied by the total eligible cost that you estimate for your proposal.
Yes. Thanks.
Yeah, and just to clarify, for this round, you are not waiting to have a framework partnership agreement signed to submit an application for an SGA, because we're running both calls at the same time. So you have to submit this time 2 proposals, one for the FPA and one for the SGA, just to be sure that we're all clear about this.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying this, Joël.
Can you give more details how the co-funding is considered? What do you look into really?
I think we already mentioned this, how it is composed, and that we just need to make sure that you can finance the rest of your costs beside the EU grant that we will give you for your work program. So,
yes. On the financial part, a box, income generated by the action, is available. Can you share more context, meaning of it, and how this weighs in the granting criteria?
As I already mentioned, this type of cost, this type of income can, for example, be an event that you organize and you ask for an entrance fee. If this is in the frame of your work program, of course, then this would fall under income generated by the action.
Yeah, and if I can react to the part on how this weights in the granting criteria, it will fall under your fundraising strategy description. So at one point in time in the application form, you're really asked to explain, how you're securing funding for your actions. And if income generating activities are part of your fundraising strategy, then that would appear there. How is it weighted? It really looked at globally, what are your strategies in terms of mobilizing funding for your organization? So it doesn't look specifically at income generating per se, but really more globally speaking at your fundraising strategy.
Yes, so it's taken into account. Can freelancers be considered as part of personal costs, Anna?
Yes, indeed. These are, in fact, the natural persons with a direct contract. So it is important to know that freelancers, that they are then not signing a contract through a company. So it is a contract with the person.
Okay. Co-finance question. If we receive the NGO operating grant, we're not supposed to receive any other operating grant from the European Commission. However, are we allowed to use another EC Action funding to co-finance the LIFE operating grants?
Well, you can have other grants from the European Commission, but not an operating grant. You can, for the same year, only receive one operating grant. And you can also not use other EU funding to co-finance the maximum of this 30%. So this is, otherwise it's double funding.
Yes, thank you. Can we ask for flat rate for personnel and at the same time for 70% for the rest of the categories?
I think we already explained that you have the direct personal costs, the 3 type of categories that are allowed. And on that amount, we will calculate 50%. And this will cover all the rest of your costs.
Yes, there is not a different rate for different categories. It's all together. Clarification. It was mentioned all staff need to record time. If staff are fully working on the work program, is this still the case? This is different than reporting attendance.
No. Well, in the past, in the previous in the previous life, 2014-2020, it was not always necessary when staff was working full-time on the program to register the time. Now, under the new life from 21-27, you need to have a time recording system. As we said, take the template that is foreseen in the portal. This is the easiest way to do it, but you need to fill it because otherwise your cost will not be considered eligible.
Okay. 3 more questions, finance. Can you share more criteria in regards to Y to Y? What is Y to Y?
Year
Budget
to year.
increase, year to year, sorry. Assuming we anticipate staff evolution in the 2 years budget in the FPA, the budget may increase from year 1 to year 2. Is this acceptable?
So I can take that one, Eva.
Yes.
So indeed, and I suppose by budget increase, you also mean EU contribution requested increase. So we're not setting a limit in terms of the increase that might you might foresee for a budget from one year to the other. So your budget can indeed increase. We do not either forbid increasing for more EU funding in year 2 than you had asked in year 1. However, be aware that we have a limited budget and the budget that we have to attribute to EU grants is not likely to increase. So you can ask for more, but we're not certain that we'll be able to grant for more. And clearly when asking for more, you need to be in a position to justify why you're asking for more. Now, the other element that you need to take into account is that you make a projection in your framework partnership agreement for year 1 and for year 2. We would expect that what you indicate in your framework partnership agreement will be the same as what you put in your year 1 because you're drafting your application for the FP and the SGA at the same time. So that shouldn't change, but the situation might evolve in 1 year time. So the figure that you have put in your FPA is not necessarily exactly the same as the figure that you would put in your SGA for year 2. So there might be a difference there. What you've put in your FPA is indicative, it's not binding. This said, again, I repeat, we have a limited budget, and if all organizations start asking more, we might not be able to finance them all.
Thank you, Joël, for the warning. Anne, I think this is for you. You said that freelancers are included in personnel costs, but subcontractors fall under the 50% costs. Why are these different?
Because freelancers, this means natural persons with a direct contract with the beneficiary, they are included in the personal cost. Subcontractors are not falling under the three categories that compose the personal costs. So, or that compose the personal, or that we consider personal of the organization. So therefore, they are covered by the flat rate. So also, if you go to other type of grant, subcontractors are always separated from personal costs.
Okay. I see that questions keep coming. We thought we had only a few to go through, but okay, still 3. Is there a minimum number of staff members required for the NGO to be eligible?
No, there is not.
I would say no. SGA, is there a 7% flat rate also as in standard action projects?
No, because we have 50% flat rate to cover all the rest. And maybe just to come back to the question on the subcontracting,
yes.
This is a commercial agreement. This is through a company. So therefore also this is not part of the personal cost, and therefore it's covered by the 50%.
Okay. So this is the last question on financial issues. Can we ask for flat rate for personnel and for 70% for the rest?
I think we already answered
the feeling
that
we
one.
have
Yes.
already seen
Yes.
this one. These are the persons who didn't listen to our advice to like the questions instead of posting them again. So yeah, so that was it. I suppose we have covered all the financial questions. So congratulations, Anne and Lorenzina, for the very good presentation and for replying to all these questions. Now, I don't know, we are very close to the end. I don't know if there is still time to take any pending questions that we had before. I would like to also remind the participants that we have a poll also for this session, and we would like to know what you thought about it. So at the end of the session, please take a few moments to go to Slido and answer to our question if you were satisfied with the information you received during this session on life operating grants, including the policy updates and part on the application process, on the evaluation process, on the financial issues to be addressed during the application. So we would be very grateful for your feedback once again, and we thank you for the participation. I don't know, Joël, do you think we can take a few more questions?
We could, but they would need to be projected because I...
Okay, can the back office display the questions, please? The Slido. While our participants are thinking whether they're satisfied or not about this session. All right. So the first of the pending questions is, in what measures this FPA will be evaluated on the basis of previous one, both from a technical and from a financial point of view? Joël, can you take this question?
So, I mean, clearly proposals, whether or not the candidates that are submitting them were actually beneficiaries of a previous framework partnership agreement, are evaluated independently. So we look at the framework partnership agreement as a standalone application, and we don't refer back to what happened in the past, unless there has been really a problematic evaluation of the report submitted under the previous specific grant agreement, in which case we might dig further into the evaluation of the previous round. But as that's not the case in 99% of the implementation of our specific grant agreements, they really looked at standalone applications.
Okay, thank you. Then the next question, to start the SGA proposal, which information from the FPA do we need to submit? The FPA proposal reference number like in 2021, or do we need another piece of information that we will have only at FPA submission level? Well, I think, yeah, when you submit the FPA proposal, you will get a number, SEP something, and then you just take that number and you would copy paste it in the SGA application. Is this correct, Joël?
Yeah, and that reference is already generated at draft level. So from the
Right.
moment you draft an FPA, you get a reference number that you then use in your SGA reference, in your SGA application.
Yes, it's a good point, in fact, so that they know that they can start both applications in parallel if needed. They don't need to finish the FPA, submit the FPA application before they start the SGA application. So that's something practical. How do you define active for operating grants for NGOs? Is it enough to have personnel hired and activities implemented in at least 3 countries, or a registered entity in each is a precondition? That's one of the eligibility criteria. They have to be active in at least 3 EU member states, right?
Yeah. So you don't have to have entities registered in each of the 3 countries, but you have to be able to demonstrate that you have a structure and activities that allow you to implement activities in at least 3 countries. Now, having personnel hired in these 3 countries, it's a bit complicated for us to give you a yes or no answer, but would it be sufficient to have those personnel hired in those 3 countries in order to be able to demonstrate that you're able to intervene and carry out activities in these 3 countries? And this, we can really look at it when we look at your statutes, we look at your action report from the previous year, we look at the extent to which you're mandated either by member organization or by organizations in your network to represent them as well from those countries to the EU level. So having personnel hired per se wouldn't be sufficient. You would really have to demonstrate through your statutes and various other documents that you're providing us with, including your activities report from the previous year, that you were able to not only act in these 3 countries, but also represent your constituency in these 3 countries back to the EU policy processes.
Thank you. What is the timeline we should think about when writing the medium-term impacts of the FPA? Is 2 years end of FPA, or can it go beyond? Can it be the same for FPA and SGA?
Yeah, that's a tricky question because I mean, obviously, we would rather you think medium term in terms of the duration of your FPA and impact in terms of the implementation of your SGA. So it would be more like a 2-year and a 1-year, respecting the duration of the FPA and the SGA respectively. But obviously, you're also welcome in the description of your impact to go for more long-term type of impacts. And differentiate them between the duration of the FPA and the SGA and what you consider to be more long-term impact. We don't have any prescription as to what is the duration of the impact that you have. So if you think long-term in terms of 5 years beyond the implementation of your FPA, explain that in your proposal. This said, when we will assess, we will look at the impact during the implementation. So don't omit that. Think medium term in terms of 2 years for the FPA, 1 year for the SGA. If you can think beyond, then great. But don't only think beyond the implementation of the FPA.
Right. Thanks a lot. Next question is expected impact from the call. Applicants are expected to explain and define the impact of their organization's activities, both generally and with regard to the proposed activities. What is expected in terms of general impact? Joël, you want to take this one again?
Well, we really want to see what is your organization expecting in terms of its impact in the different policy areas that were defined and explained in terms of the general objectives of the LIFE program. So by general impact, I mean, it's really up to you to decline and explain to us what are the impact of your organization in the different fields of intervention, and the impact of the proposed activities that you will be carrying. We don't have a definition of what do we mean by general. It's really the overall aim of the work program in the different areas in which you will be working, for which we ask you to be as qualitative and quantitative as possible in the description of what you expect to achieve.
Right. Next question. In the eligibility criteria, is involvement in energy transition obligatory if the NGO's main focus is biodiversity? Does it need to be both biodiversity and energy transition? I would
So it's a
say
shame that
the
we
short
don't have the
question is no.
policy, we
Yes.
don't have our policy colleagues anymore, but
Uh,
we suspect that this question comes from a very specific reference in the call document to the implementation of the Fit 55.
mhm.
So it's true that there is a strong ask emanating from our colleagues from the DG Energy to ask to focus when intervening in the field of energy transition on implementation, but that's when the organization has foreseen activities and objectives in the field of energy transition. Clearly, it's not mandatory to act on energy transition, but if the organization has an objective to work on energy transition, then in that case, there is an ask to focus on the implementation aspect. I think that was made very clear during the policy presentation that there is already a bulk of legislation now that are in place. And now we're speaking about transposition at EU member state level and implementation at EU member states level. And that's where the emphasis in terms of implementing the clean energy transition part of the Fit 55 project should be going. This is by no means an indication that it's mandatory to act on energy transition. So we have organizations, as I said early on, that occupy very niche types of topics, and they are not asked to change the scope of their work at all. So no, you don't need to do both.
Thank you. And the last question, in the form participation information, you asked to describe the 5 most relevant projects carried out by the organization. Is it possible to include this section as a separate annex if our most relevant projects are more than those 5?
I mean, don't feel that you need to provide more than that. That will be enough for us to understand the relevance of your organization, the capacity of your organization, so on and so forth. So please don't start adding separate annexes. We're sure that there are many organizations that could present 100 projects that would be relevant, but we would ask you to limit yourself to what is asked. That will be ample enough in terms of information for us to be able to assess the elements that are assessed on the basis of the participants' information form. So please don't annex anything, don't add anything there.
All right. Although they can add
but they submit
annexes
an
if needed, but it's not necessary.
And
right?
you provide an activity report, and that's also where we have a source of information that we use in the evaluation.
All right. Well, we have come to the end of this question and answer session and of the overall session on the call for life operating grants. And I want to thank very much all our panelists and all the persons who participated with all the questions. Thanks a lot. I didn't see the results of the poll, so I would like to ask participants, please, once again, take a second to participate in the poll and tell us if you were satisfied or less satisfied about this session. And well, let's see if we can have the results of the poll. I will check also on Slido. Unfortunately, we don't see the
I think
results.
we won't see them, Eva. It's not something that you actually see online. It's something that we keep for ourselves.
Yes. Sorry. Yes. So well, then I didn't want to say it, but we have come to the end of this session, and I wanted to really thank everybody for being here and for participating and for giving so much input. And I would like to tell our participants really all the best for your application. And well, let's keep in touch. If you have any questions, you can send them to us via the functional mailbox. Otherwise, we are here to help you. The national contact points are here to help you. And we really wish you all the best for your future application and your future endeavors. And we will hope to welcome you again in the LIFE family soon. So have a good rest of the day and have a good weekend. Goodbye.